Welcome to the Feeling Loudly podcast, a show about human emotion and the way we navigate this life of trials and triggers and treasures with the help of astrology and tarot. I'm your host, Jana. I'm an astrologer, a tarot reader, and an Akashic Records reader, and I'm here to help you do this messy life with as much grace, ease, and pleasure as possible. Hello, friends. Welcome to day 21 of 22 Days of Tarot. Today is Judgment Day. And Judgment Day is wild. I had a wild day from start to finish in sort of cosmic ways. And it started off interestingly. I obviously released the sun episode this morning, and so I was still kind of in solar energy this morning. And then I had a client reading this morning, and I was focused on Mars. And then I was preparing for our first planetary lab, our Mars lab. And actually, no one who registered ended up coming to the live event. And so it helped me kind of regroup and prepare a little bit more. And I'm actually just going to record a solo workshop and then list it for sale. And so it felt like this moment of something shifted, but it shifted in the right way in order for me to prepare to deliver something even better. And that felt very Judgment. This is the second to last card in the tarot, or in the Major Arcana. And it's a moment of reckoning usually, where we have to kind of look back on the past and assess and make a final choice, decide which path we're going to take in order to close out this journey. And so just that came up as a subtle little thing, but really really a lot came up today, starting with my tarot pull this morning, which was really focused. Actually, let me back up. Before my tarot pull, I slept in a little bit later than usual because I was up late last night. And then I skipped my usual routine in the morning, and everything was a little bit off, but it felt okay and not destabilizing, which is good for me with my little 6th house Pluto that can be obsessive about those things. And so it was good. I was rolling with the punches and just kind of letting it be, flipping things, doing this first, doing that later, rearranging my day in order to make it work for me. And when I actually got to my altar, I connected with Saturn and I asked for some support and clarity in my next steps and what I need to be focused on. And my offering oracle card that I pulled was the direction card. So they were kind of well, you tell me, what do you need support with? Go ahead and name your direction and actually focus on it. And so I asked for some more specific support and kind of named where I wanted to head. But I had this moment of confusion where I was maybe I don't know the answer to this question. It's feeling so much less clear than it was just a few days ago. And so it was good to regroup and be damn, things can shift just in a matter of a week when I last pulled that card. And so I had this moment where I restated my intentions, and it felt like a regroup moment, very Judgment-esque. And then when I did my practice for the day, really interesting visuals were coming through. So first I saw mushrooms, and then I saw brains. And then it got me thinking about The Last of Us, that HBO show, which I consumed very quickly in 2022 or 2023, whenever it came out. And how, in a way, that's sort of a Judgment Day kind of story. These humans face the consequences of choices that they made, and ends up turning into this sort of apocalyptic situation with a zombie apocalypse. And that was very down to the final episode, and I won't give anything away, but that final episode was very much having to own your choices and having to come face to face with the consequences of the path that you choose. And we talked a little bit about consequences and the concept of karma a couple episodes ago. And I don't mean in a heavy puritanical way. I just mean more so our choices and our behavior have consequences and things occur, whether those are like what we deem as positive or negative or somewhere in between, doesn't matter so much. It's just like an action has a consequence. There is a result from the choices that you make. And so I was thinking a lot about that today as I was tuning into this Martian energy with that reading and then with my workshop. And then as I connected with myself and tuned into just the feeling of being in judgment energy, got that show coming through. And then I saw a butterfly. I saw like a big blue butterfly. And I was like, all right, transformation. Like, this is a card of transformation where we consciously choose to transform. Like, we've been through all of these transformations throughout our journey from the Fool all the way up until this moment. And now we make the choice. Now, like, we carry the wand and we have so much wisdom under our belts that it's time for us to make a choice that is like rooted in what it is that we actually desire and what it is that's actually authentic to us. And so judgment to me has never felt particularly heavy, interestingly. This is a Pluto card, though, and Pluto is a planet of transformation. And judgment itself can feel like this at times heavy, like shadow worky type card where it's like, okay, what's really going on here? I have to take a hard look at my past actions or my past choices and really assess like what is driving me, what is moving me, what is motivating me. And so when I actually like tuned into the question, it was, how can I open up? And I'm just going to turn to my notes because there was a lot. So the first answer that I got, well, before I even asked the question, I heard detachment and power. And then when I tuned into the question of how I can open up, I saw a butterfly and I heard a message about surrender. And then I heard this metaphor, I guess, for like when you're flying, if you're a butterfly and you're like flying in the wind, that there's really no point in resisting the gust of wind. Like the wind is going to carry you. You have these very light wings, but you can rock with that and you can roll with that and you can kind of use it to gain momentum and to be propelled to the place that you want to go eventually. And maybe you have to like stop over on a branch for a little bit or something and like gather yourself. But it's about kind of working with the conditions that you've been presented with as opposed to resisting them. And that in itself can be a form of surrender, like acceptance for what is. And I also got an oracle card earlier that was just, it is what it is, like accepting things at face value instead of trying to change them, instead of trying to like wrestle with fate or wrestle with the past. It can be about coming into presence and just like very honestly assessing where things are at and pragmatically moving forward. And that in itself is big work for me personally and for a lot of people, is coming to accept things instead of like grip so tightly to them. And coming into today's exercise, I should add that like, I don't know if I even mentioned this in yesterday's podcast, in the Sun podcast, but my like really difficult day with the Sun was closed out on a note where I had a hypnosis session with Marta, who's part of our 22-day tarot challenge and who's a wonderful hypnotist and psychic intuitive human. And I was showing up with like a lot of grief around love and just feeling the impending approach of Neptune on my natal Venus, which is going to exact for the first time or perfect for the first time in 2 weeks, and kind of be a huge signature of my next year of life and even beyond that. And so that can be a transit that's hard. It can bring in disillusionment. It can bring in like fantasy. And that's something I already struggle with quite a bit as a Pisces Venus. And so I've been both like a little anxious about it, but also eager, because there's also this beauty and this like heart opening expansion that can bring us into new levels of compassion and love and connection. And it's also a time when you might encounter soulmates and meet people that really change the trajectory of your life in a big way. And so that's something I've been experiencing in my friendships in a really big way. And I've had these synchronistic meetings with folks that have felt like really powerful and really, really meaningful. And so I'm treading the line between knowing like I'm probably seeing a lot of stuff in my life through rose-colored glasses at this moment. And you know what? That's okay. Because like as it fades, we might come into a greater sense of reality, but like that's reality too. Like sometimes love is divine. Sometimes it is a soulmate. Sometimes like the magic is very much alive. And I know that well because even in relationships where eventually I've been like, okay, that didn't work out. Maybe I was disillusioned or maybe I was caught up in a fantasy. The fantasy was still very real and felt. And I think there's this it reminds me of the song Mystery of Love by Sufjan Stevens, and how in many ways the connection between humans that share this like really profound energetic resonance with each other is very mysterious. And it's something artists and romantics have tried to capture and articulate for since antiquity and to varying degrees of success. And I think at some point like it's hard because you really have to feel it, and it's easy for us as realists and pragmatists to be like, we need to like define exactly what this is and be thoughtful about our boundaries and say no to enmeshment and all of this shit. And that is all good and well and necessary for our well-being. And also there's a sort of transcendence that certain types of love can bring, and a certain like soul growth that really deep and spiritual love can bring. And that's not like my Pisces Venus saying like someone's gonna save me or like that love will save everyone. It's more so just an appreciation for the beauty and the grandness and the mystery and the symphony of love in its many, many forms. And so I was reflecting on that today and thinking about how, as I was listening to this episode of Ghost of a Podcast, where Jessica Lanyadoo does like listener questions and does live chart readings for people. And the episode that was released this week was about an obsessive crush. And this person was talking about how they had like fallen into an unrequited love situation, and they just like couldn't get over this person, and it had been a year, and it was like really taking a toll on their life. And it sounded really painful. And Jessica Lanyadoo is a triple Capricorn, very pragmatic and very wise, and was really kind of like bringing the reality and saying like, this has nothing to do with this person. This is about you and your patterns. And like, I found myself being like, eh. Like that's, I'm sure that's very, very true. And also, sometimes we do have bonds with people that elicit really strange reactions and that really bring out parts of us that really only specific connections could bring out of us. And that's something I'm trying to appreciate, is like the nuance of that. Like we can at once be healthy and self-loving and respectful and boundaried to and for ourselves and other people. And we can allow ourselves to like be immersed in the sea of love at times, and to surrender and to let go and to experience life. And so that's kind of a line that I'm trying to toe very cautiously as I enter this transit that I know has the propensity or the capacity to drag me into the sea of love and blindfold me in the process. So just trying to be wise, but also trying to fucking love. And I'm here for the love. So anyway, kind of a little detour that we took there, but that was all coming up for me. And again, the question was, how can I open up? And so I got that message around the butterfly and like embracing the conditions that you're working with instead of avoiding them. And then I got this visual of me like ripping my chest open at first. And it was this comparison image of like, this is how you used to do things. And I mentioned that on yesterday's episode, like self-sacrifice and martyrdom and like, here I am, take my heart. And that's just not my vibe anymore. Like I could do that, but I don't want to. It doesn't feel good anymore. It's gotten me into a lot of trouble and heartache. And I'm wiser now, and I'm still loving, and now I can like love more wisely. And that was really good to see, to have that reaction to this like heart ripping open image was like interesting, but not me anymore. Because I get to make that choice, right? Like back at Judgment, I get to make that choice of which path I'm going to take here and who I want to be going forward. And I heard there are softer and safer ways to open up. And that was like basically this message around not having to go to extremes and not having to reveal parts of myself before I'm ready to, and being able to practice that sort of judgment-esque discernment that says, like, let me check in with myself here. Let me make sure this feels okay. Let me actually like align with my own direction and get right with myself, and then make the conscious choice to connect with people in a way that feels authentic and true. And that's what makes space for intimacy, right? Like when we like rip our chests open, it ends up being bloody and not particularly easy. Then the other person might have to like clean up that mess, or you might have to clean it up later. The both of you have to clean it up. And the focus becomes like the breakdown as opposed to the breaking open. And breaking open, like allowing our hearts to break open, doesn't have to happen through heartbreak. It can happen through the gradual opening and choice, like the conscious intention of I'm going to love and I'm going to share parts of me over time as I feel safe to. And that's how we build trust with each other and with ourselves, is by not like jumping off the cliff. It's by like gradually descending and making sure you're like, you got your safety gear on, and that allows you to engage with life and love in a safer way that also makes space for intimacy, instead of this like extreme like heart ripping open thing that can lead to really tragic places at times. And so that was a good check-in and a good self-reflection to be like, that was my old way and that's not my way anymore. Like I want to love differently and I want to live differently. And then after I kind of named that out loud, I saw that butterfly get bigger, and then it was floating above this like dark rocky mound. And I heard, you're seeing things differently. And at this point I was actually holding the card in my hand with my eyes closed. And then when I opened them, I saw a bird, a white bird. It looks like probably a dove, that is flying or hovering above like a dark rocky mound. And so it wasn't a butterfly, but it was this bird, and a really like stunning reflection of the image that was in my mind. And this shift from like blue to white into this sense of cleansing. And this bird is just like hovering above this rocky mound, and there's this dark ocean behind it, and we can see, it looks like sunset. Although it might be sunrise. I don't know. Who's to say? But I bet it's sunset, just with like the symbolism of judgment. But you know what? Like judgment is also often about resurrection. And that can be like a really big theme in the judgment card, is like, what is coming back to life if we make the choice to bring it back to life? And I felt that. I felt sort of like my heart was like restarted today. And after that shit that went down yesterday, again, I had this hypnosis session with Marta, and we actually ended up focusing a lot on love, and Marta just guided me there intuitively. I like showed up kind of frazzled and was like, I'm having a day. And they were like, I want to take you into the love cave today. And so they guided me into the love cave through hypnosis. And I basically was like half asleep, and I've never been able to get that deep into a hypnosis before. But I have a lot of like spirit activity that was going down. And at one point I was in this like this cave, this love cave, and there was this pool of water, and I just morphed into a mermaid and was like chilling in the water and like scooping up this deliciousness and this sweetness and this healing. And a lot of the material that I was going into the session with was about control and wanting to like feeling so attached to outcomes and having a hard time detaching and feeling like it's gonna go how it's gonna go, and I can just accept that and like go with the flow and like take life as it comes to me. And I was wanting to like really steer. And so I went in with that feeling. Marta like helped to rearrange me in a really beautiful way. And then I like cried it out last night and had my like moody evening. And then today I woke up and I was like, damn, that shit that's been in my brain that's been like freaking me out and making me anxious doesn't feel anxious today. It feels like relaxed. And I'm actually like, it's okay. Like, it's gonna be okay. So when I was connecting with this card and I repeated the question of how can I open up, I again got that message around perspective. Like this bird is hovering above this rocky mound and they can see everything, and they're actually like looking down to the left and observing the path that they've presumably just like flown up from. And that is judgment work. It's like, where have I been and where am I going? And it's this pause. The bird feels like it's sort of suspended in air with its wings out, and it can see all, and it's taking it in before it like continues on its journey and finishes things off, which might be like landing on that mound or continuing on another path, flying over the water, who knows. So I did pull an oracle card, and it was the connection card, and so it was very apt. And it's a little bit long. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do want to read just like an excerpt from it. So it said, if you pulled this card, it's to remind you to be aware of a new connection on the horizon that will assist you in your journey into becoming. It can also be viewed as a signifier to affirm a connection that already exists that evokes a similar fated feeling, which you may have previously questioned or shook off as random. This connection will not only be meaningful in the future, but may also offer context and meaning for past and present. This auspicious conduit could be perceived as a metaphorical part of fate's invisible thread of connectivity, which will continue to weave together loose ties and create a tapestry of the moments in time that are a greater part of the life of your story. Take note of your feelings and make sure not to discount potential with doubt. Trust your intuition and what you instinctively feel, know, and see. Sometimes the first response is actually the correct one. Don't overthink what first came organically. And that has been a difficult thing with me, is like having such a strong intuitive hit, but then questioning it. Having such a strong knowing, but then going into fear. And this was exactly the message I needed today, and it was exactly the message I needed from my hypnosis session with Marta last night. Like, it all crystallized for me, and I was like, damn, I can actually relax. like I feel present now, and I can actually experience life and trust myself and trust the universe and trust the path that I'm on here. And that trust itself helps me make a choice, because I believe I can make good choices. So our exercise today was bibliomancy, and I got some really interesting messages. First, I turned to books, but when I was like walking by my bookshelf, I was like, get the yearbook, get the yearbook. And I thought that was bizarre, because like, what could my middle school yearbook have to tell me about the Judgment card today? So I'm going to start with the other ones, and then we will get to that, because it was kind of a lot. So for my bibliomancy, first I used the little online oracle, and it was, with only a tailpipe burn, the point is I can't quite say no, and neither can you, and who wants to anyway? Especially when you're not really sure what you might lose. Is that why you moved the gun to the bedroom? From Happiness by Laura Van Proyen. Kind of ominous, a little bit. And I haven't read the full thing, so I'm going to have to go back and actually read that, and I'll link the full poem below in case anyone else wants to. But this idea of like, I can't quite say no, and neither can you, and who wants to anyway, like very much about making a choice. And so this element of choice was pulled in here. And then the second passage was from this book called Radical Hope, Letters of Love and Dissent in Dangerous Times by Carolina de Robartes. It's a compilation of of letters from like activists and voices. And mine was by Aya de Leon, and I will read this passage to you. So it says, we criticized the canon and we deconstructed higher education's Eurocentrism, male domination, Christian hegemony, and the preoccupation with the wealthy. We sharpened our tools of critique on institutions of power and then fought for them to be institutionalized in the curriculum. From the 70s to the 90s, these were tools of radicalism, and these tools are still needed to critique entrenched privileges and institutions of power. And in your excellence, your generation, this is addressed to millennials, by the way. I think it's actually called like for the millennials or something. So it says, and in your excellence, your generation, aka millennials, also learn to use these tools of critique on each other. Radical spaces in colleges taught deconstruction without teaching how to build and create and generate. You spoke hard truths to power, but you also spoke hard truths to peers. And these tools created a culture where young people of conscience are often afraid to act and afraid to generate, afraid their unacknowledged privilege will show, afraid to offend. In progressive communities, taking action or leadership or generating new ideas happens under threat of harsh wreaths, under fears of humiliation or excommunication. We unwittingly gave you the means to create a culture where everyone waits on the sidelines for someone else to say or do something. Everyone is a critic, and it's unsafe to step up with our imperfections. So instead of a culture of shared vulnerability and building new possibilities, instead of a culture where people try and fail and celebrate the attempt, we've unwittingly created a culture where many people feel inhibited by fear and inaction until and unless they are perfect. Holy crap. This is so on point with what I was noodling on just a few days ago, and I'm spacing on the particular episode that it was, but I think it may have been The Tower, perhaps. I can't remember exactly. Where I was talking about my experience where I had like a little interaction with someone online, and how a lot of folks in leftist spaces will sort of like attack as soon as they see something they deem as bad or wrong. And this passage really brought me back to that, and also felt so much like Judgment energy if it's in its shadow, where it's like actually harshly critiquing other people and sort of like volleying blame and anger at people where it's probably not due, and instead creating division and like weakening our collective power in the process. And so that was like really clear for me, this message around, I don't know, it just felt like all these different threads that have been floating around throughout this challenge crystallized in Judgment Day today, with like the relationship stuff, with the like dogma stuff. And that actually came through in my reading, or in my hypnosis session with Marta too, from a bibliomancy passage that they shared with me, that was about like dogma and rejecting dogma. And then what is the third piece? There have been a lot of threads, but it just felt like a lot of crystallizing of this stuff, a lot of like clarity coming through. And finally, I'm a little nervous about this one. So finally I turned to my yearbook, and I was like flipping through the pages and like, these people don't look very familiar. I finally found my class, and I found my own photo, and my face was crossed out, and I had written ugly picture me on it and like scribbled my face out in my 6th grade yearbook. And so I was like 12 years old at this time. And then I started glancing through my class photos, and I saw that I had written like mean comments on different people's photos, like drew like huge ears on someone. I wrote slut on someone's photo, and like it was really hard to read actually, and like hard to look at. It really took me aback because I don't remember this. I was 12 years old. And it really kind of shook me. At first I was like, damn, was I like a bully when I was 12? Is that what was happening here? And then I remembered what was actually going on for me around that time. And I realized that this was like the lead up to technically me getting the legal ability to define my own schedule, which is something I've talked about on the pod, like the custody battle that I went through as a kid and how my schedule was court ordered for like my whole childhood. And so everything from like the holidays to like my day-to-day activities was like written by a court. And so that was a huge thing for me that kind of defined my childhood. And this would have been the year that was like my final year under a court-ordered schedule. And after that point, I would be able to define it on my terms, even though I ended up not doing that and like sticking with the same schedule because I was too afraid to stir any further conflict. But needless to say, that was a troubled time. And as I like sat with this yearbook and read what was hard to read, because I was like, wow, this is like ugly behavior. Like this, I don't like this. This makes me really uncomfortable. This is hard to look at. This is like judgment stuff. Like it's hard to look at this and take this in. It occurred to me that I was like just really, really angry. And I didn't have an outlet for that. And so I guess my outlet was like writing mean comments on people's photos in my yearbook, including my own. And I was trying to like channel that rage into some place and I guess maybe feel temporarily powerful by criticizing other people and by like mocking and teasing other people silently in my own yearbook. And it just like, I don't think anyone ever saw this. I don't know. I never, at least that I remember, like outwardly teased anyone, but this is obviously stuff that I was harboring internally. And at that age, I was really shy and really insecure. And this was the first year of middle school. And I also had a lot of insecurity about the stuff that was going on at home and not having like a nuclear family, at least that resembled the families of the kids that I grew up with. And growing up in this rich community and having very little in comparison to most of my peers. So there was this constant comparison game that was happening here. And I think like me, like writing this stuff in this yearbook was probably a way of feeling better than these people and a way of like reclaiming a bit of my pride, maybe when I was feeling very, very low. And so part of how I came to that is because I pulled a tarot card because I was like, what the fuck was going on here? And I was like, what was I so angry about that caused me to do this? And I got the 10 of Cups. And it really instantly pulled me into this idea of like this fantasy where I thought that everyone else had everything. And the truth is, I knew very little about most of these kids' experiences at home. Like, sure, maybe a lot of them had way more money, but I don't know what their home experience was like. Like, they could have had terrible traumatic experiences growing up too. And I guarantee you a good amount of them did. And yet, like at that age, I didn't have that awareness. I just had these like outward markers of what the quote, like good life looked like. And it was very much centered on money and centered on having two parents and having a dog and a big house and all of this stuff that I envied and was frankly like humiliated by my life and the fact that like my family had 4 different last names in it. And my dad would roll up in this like old like dripping oil Montero, and it was embarrassing for me. And I remember like many experiences like that where I just felt this like such acute humiliation. And yeah, so I guess this was my way of processing it. And when I came to that, I felt so much more compassion for this little version of me that was really hurting and didn't have anyone to talk to about it, and probably didn't know what to do with their emotions. And yeah, so that felt judgment too. Like at first I judged myself harshly for that, and then I came to a place of compassion and love and was like, yeah, you know, little Jan was doing her best, and I sent some love my way and like held that 12-year-old version of myself for a little bit and then moved forward. So my final thing tonight, after that little anecdote is that my song of the day was Always This Late by Odessa, which I haven't heard in a while. And this is actually a lyricless song, but it does sample a song, and I think the lyrics that came up when I Googled it are from maybe whatever song was sampled, because you definitely don't hear these in it. It's just sort of like jumbled noises. But I want to read to you the lyrics that show up when I Google Always This Late. Scented trees of pine and oak that stare afar the nature folk, the calmly wind that soothe your face beyond the call of beauty trace. And late you were on this here day to watch the rise of dawning ray, where then you glimpse the violet touch of world reflect by golden march. So I thought that was lovely because it's this idea of the dawn and the violet touch. And it is March right now, golden March. And so it kind of just rooted me in the poetry of this moment in spring here in the Northern Hemisphere, and the trees, which have been companions throughout this whole journey, and just like immersing yourself in the sensuality of the sunrise. And that, like, now looking at the Judgment card, I'm like, this is the sunrise. It's not the sunset. It's all about the shift in perspective. Like, maybe it's both. But when I'm looking at this card right now, it feels like a sunrise. And there's hope in that. And Judgment actually brings us into hope. And there's a reason that the book I chose for bibliomancy was called Radical Hope. Like, hope is a radical act. Hope is radical. The hope of seeing the sun rise again, and the hope of just knowing that there's a new horizon, knowing that there is beauty and brilliance ahead, even if shit feels rocky and rough right now, that things will change. And if I could go back in time, that's what I would tell little Jan in 2002. I would tell her that there is a lot of change on the horizon and that things won't always feel this way. So, that's all I got, y'all. I'm both really sad and like looking forward to closing this series out tomorrow. And I'm sure I'll have a lot of words and feelings to express on that episode. But for now, just want to thank you for walking with me for this long and this far. I really appreciate and feel the support and the love, and I'm sending it back. Talk to you tomorrow.